All right, home theater 2.0, let's keep the project going. So I've been so busy working on my home theater that I missed my chances to shave in the last few weeks, and I think I'm just going to let it go. I'm kind of making a challenge for myself. The beard's not going until the theater is done, and we'll see what happens. I feel like I'm an NHL player in the Stanley Cup Finals, and I'm not going to shave until we win that Game 7. So we'll see what happens with that, and what my wife has to say about it too. But in the meantime, progress is going to go a little bit slower. From where I'm at, functional room, I actually sat down and watched a movie this week, Pacific Rim Uprising. Maybe not the best movie, but it was a shorter one, hour and a half, and I needed a shorter movie for the time that I had. Sounded awesome, really, really awesome. So I'm happy with what I've seen so far. I still got to get that subwoofer moved over. I'm waiting for the longer XLR cable to come from Amazon. From recording this, hopefully that cable will come tomorrow. I did a second arc calibration because I realized when I set up the Arendal subwoofers, following the recommendations and such on their webpage, I was actually using the webpage for music, not for movies. So I had some mistakes in my subwoofer config. I fixed all of that, set it up for home theater, and that's good to go. I will be doing a dedicated video amongst everything that I have to cover on using the Arendal app. It's really, really nice. So 2 thumbs up to everything that I've seen with these subwoofers so far. What I'm going to do right now is get these subwoofers wired up on some triggers. So I ordered a 6-foot 3.5 millimeter mono cable and a 10-foot 3.5 millimeter mono cable from Amazon, $5 or $6 a piece. So I have one of the 3 triggers of my Anthem going to the Parasound A31 Halo, driving the LCR speakers. That has a trigger output, so I'm going to chain the Parasound, that one Parasound, to the first subamp, or to the first subwoofer, the closer one of course. And then I've got a couple of little mono 2-to-1 splitters that I bought a while ago. It should make all the same electrical connections. What I'm expecting to do is take the 6-foot cable out of the Parasound, put the splitter on the first sub, go into the splitter on one side, and then come out of the splitter with the 10-foot cable, which will get me over to the other sub. And I'll test my theory that it doesn't matter where you split the signal. It's all the same circuit. It's not like there's audio. It's just a 12 volt. It's just a voltage signal. So everything comes on like I expect. If I have to split the signal actually at the output of the amplifier, then these cables aren't going to work. I need a 15-footer, and those were surprisingly hard to find. These little 3.5 millimeter mono cables on Amazon seem to top out around 10 feet. Or the one 15-footer I found had to wait until like March or something, and I don't want to bother with that. So that isn't what I expected to see at all. So I have the app configured. I plugged the cables in. They seem to come on with the amp, but they're still green despite Anthem main zone being off. If something's going to work on a trigger, I would expect it to come on with the trigger and go off with the lack of the trigger. However, these don't seem to do that. If I go into settings, you can see there I'm set to 12 volt trigger XLR1 on both amplifier or both subwoofers. So I set the off time to 5 minutes. I'm gonna let that expire, I guess. These little dots go red when the subwoofers shut off. But either this isn't working right, or it's definitely like an X-bug, or what we would call an X-bug at work, where something appears to work to spec, but it's wrong to the user. This is definitely wrong to the user. I've never put something on a trigger before and not had it power off when the trigger signal goes away. Alright, so trigger cables on the subs, no go. I'm just going to return them to Amazon. I think I'm fine leaving the subwoofers on the auto sensing. It seems to be pretty reliable. You set it to high sensitivity in the app per the Arendal recommendation, and I haven't had any issue with them turning on and then of course staying on while there's active signal. Actually, with the high sensitivity, just turning on the Anthem alone seems to reliably turn the subwoofers on, even in the absence of an actual audio signal or anything being present. I don't know if it was a mistake to try to put the splitter on the subwoofer side versus splitting actually from the preamp. But again, if I split from the preamp, I need a 15-foot, 3.5 millimeter mono cable. Those are not readily available on Amazon. Screw it. The other thing that's nice about the system right now is it's running with a real low noise floor, and I want to keep it that way. Connecting more things together with wires, copper wires, is probably asking for trouble. So auto sensing, it's fine all the way for the subwoofers, no big deal. So we've also cranked a couple of movies in the room. We watched Detective Pikachu last night. After having done a proper subwoofer setup and a follow-up Anthem ARC config, I realized that, again, the first time I set the subwoofers up, I did it wrong. I followed the instructions for the music settings, not the home theater settings. So I got that all set, recalibrated Anthem, and I have to say this room sounds better than I've ever heard it sound before. I think the balanced combination of this Anthem preamp, these Parasound amplifiers, those speakers, and those subwoofers, the whole is definitely greater than the sum of its parts. It's like the sound is so crisp and detailed and sharp, but at the same time you can still hear the Parasounds and a little bit of the warmth that they're adding to the Focals. Everything feels so quickly transient, so accurate. It's just like, sound is just like a knife cutting through butter. Hot knife cutting through butter. It's really exceptional. And the one scene in Detective Pikachu where the Tortugas, or whatever the big tortoise Pikachu things are, start coming up out of the ground, and that rumble was so it was very intense, not overbearing. And so much of the other bass coming from these subwoofers so far just hits, boom, it hits like a snap, and you can feel it. You can feel it in your gut, you can feel it through the couch. Really awesome, really cool. I've still got more to do, of course. I've got the 15-foot world's best cable, Mogami wire Nutric connector. I'm going to hook that up tonight, move the right subwoofer to the right where it should be, rather than kind of that having one over to the side and one like at the midpoint. We'll get that set up properly, and then I'm going to go ahead and rerun ARC again, of course. Since I moved the subwoofer, I need to redo the calibrations, and then we'll be able to finally hit a stasis point in the room. Can stop moving 95-pound subwoofers around, at least for the two Arundels, and just sit back and enjoy some stuff. So now that I have the permanent cable to put in there, I'm actually going to run it in the wire channels and get everything positioned, pull my slack through the wall. I also have these smaller power cable runs, although I have been looking at some other power cables for some of the more nicer things to plug in. Maybe some Pangeas or something like that off of Amazon. All squared up, measured out, equidistant to the sidewalls, equidistant to the screen. Got about a 3-inch gap between the back edge of the subwoofer and the screen on both subs. Time for a new Anthem calibration. So the other thing I've been given some hard thought with regards to the room and the next steps is these guys. These are the GIK grid fusers. And I know they were recommended by GIK as a preferable solution to add some diffusion and some absorption and that sort of thing to the ceiling of the room. And I am completely committed to treating the ceiling to some extent. The more I look at these, the more I think about some of the work involved in painting them and managing them and the styrofoam and whatnot. I think maybe that the way that they're going to look on the ceiling, I don't know. I just don't know that they're the right solution for the space. Even if they might be the best or the more ideal acoustical option, I'm afraid that they're very big, right? I think they're going to overload the ceiling. And even painted black, 8 of these things up there, I feel like I'm going to walk in the room, or I'm going to sit down on the couch and I'm going to look forward and I'm going to look up, and all I'm going to see is grid fusers, and I'm not going to have my focus and stuff on the screen. I can already catch myself right now, but this is reasonable, I think, for any of us that are into this stuff. You know, you make some changes, you do some things in your space, you sit down to do some content, and you find yourself not paying attention to the content. You're listening to the room and you're listening to the gear. You're not listening to the movie, or you're watching the screen, right? You're watching the projected image. You're not watching the movie. So that's pretty natural, I think, especially for a little while after a lot of stuff changes. And I found myself these first couple movies that I've watched in there definitely coming out of the content and watching and listening to the gear, and then kind of going back into the content and back and forth and so on. But I'm having more and more of a fear that whenever I go in this room, all I'm going to see is grid fusers. And so GIK has another panel. They call it the 2A. It comes in a thinner variety. It's a 2-inch foam essentially with a thin wood diffusion panel, and they have a 1D and a 2D version of it. I already ordered a couple of those in the black charcoal to put on the back wall above the speakers. I think I mentioned that in the prior videos. And I think that might be a better panel for the ceiling. It still provides some two-dimensional diffusion. It still adds some absorption. And I was emailing back and forth with the guys at GIK that were giving me some advice, and they said, yeah, well, the 2As would do some work on the ceiling. The grid fuser is probably better, but you have to weigh everything, right? You have to weigh the effort involved to get them up there and get them looking right. You have to weigh the aesthetics and the visuals and so on of what you're doing. And so I think it's reasonable to give up potentially some percentage of acoustic performance that I might get out of the panels and just go with the 2As, because I think they're going to have 2 times, 3 times, 4 times just better presentation. And when I sit in the room and I'm looking around and I'm looking at things, I think I will find having the 2A panels on the ceiling far more pleasing, perhaps, than the grid fuser. So I actually put in a request, and I got return labels to send the grid fusers back. I'm right kind of at the limit of my return period. They graciously still sent me the return labels. So I need to decide pretty quickly. I'm basically, I think, going to decide by Saturday ultimately. If I'm going to send these back, I'll run them and mail them back on Saturday, get my new ones placed. Unfortunately, it's probably going to create some delay. I suspect if I put in an order for 8 2A panels right now, I'm probably not seeing those things until March. But so be it. The 2 that'll cover up the marks on the back wall are coming within hopefully a couple of weeks. The ceiling's finished. It looks nice. It's fine. I've gone 4 years without ceiling treatments. What's another month, right? I can wait another month to make sure that I have the right solution for the space that I'm going to be happy with, and I'm not going to second guess and so on. So that decision is pending, but I think I probably will send these back. So the other night I got tired of waiting for help and went ahead and just lifted these big boy Electras up into the living room myself. It wasn't too bad, actually. They're a bit over 100 pounds, but obviously big and awkward. But because of the gap down under the front, I was able to grab them, lift them up, and used all of my gym strength to heft them up here into the living room. They're not actually wired because my wires are still going to the in walls, and if I'm going to keep these here, I'm going to have to change quite a bit in terms of pulling in walls out, punching the wire through, considering whether the source and processing for these speakers is going to stay downstairs in the rack or potentially move up here. I could potentially see some kind of a shelf in front of the screen where the processing and future amplification or whatever for these speakers would go. For the foreseeable future, I'd probably still stick with what I have though. Use the Zone 2 of the AVM 70 and the extra couple of Parasound A52 amp channels because it's all there and it works. But I don't know. I don't know what to think of these quite yet. I asked my wife the other day. She actually came home. She was out with some friends. Came home and didn't even notice them when I had the TV on. It was evening. Lights were dim and so on. And I was like, hey, check out those speakers. So I guess that was one positive mark, but I think she pretty much hated it, and she just didn't want to say that. And I have to admit, I'm kind of mixed. After, whatever, it's been 8 years of this living room with the custom bump out and the TV kind of in that inset and the nice clean in walls, as much as I like looking at the towers, having them down in front of the TV like this, I don't know. I'm kind of mixed. They might be up for sale. I really like them, but they might still go. To consider as well, in the reality, they'd probably have to come out from the wall a little bit. I've got them pretty far back, almost kind of right up against it. And I'd probably have to spread them a little wider. We got the kids' little art table over there on the side, so it's real close to that. We're getting real close to this chair, and that chair spins. And I've got a little guy that loves to take running dives in there. I don't know, I could just see an errant foot flailing out, knocking the top of that tower, and timber, down it goes. But they're also pretty darn big and heavy, and they have a pretty decent like center of mass, and they are kind of stable. But if I move that thing a little more to the right, sitting in that chair, it's pretty crowded. I think a pair of in-wall Utopias, or maybe even just keep the subs and put a pair, same as in the theater, a pair of the Focal 1000 IW LCR6s as an upgrade to the Triad Silvers. Stick with the Focal, and that could be the ticket. We'll see. So I don't know. What do you think? Post in the comments. Is it obtrusive? I mentioned putting that shelving down in front with the gear. I think that would serve to further just like take away from sitting in here in the cleanliness of just watching television when you got all this stuff in front of you. I'm still considering the vinyl, but I don't know. Realistically, I might not bother with vinyl. Apple Music, high-res Apple Music and Atmos Apple Music and all that stuff is just, it's too good. It's too easy. It's too cheap to access pretty much anything that you might ever want to play in really good streaming quality. So I guess why complicate that with vinyl, buying expensive individual records and all that sort of thing. And it's got to go somewhere and store somewhere. I don't know. So what do you think? Towers, in walls, clean it up. It'll definitely be a sad day to sell these, and a heartfelt goodbye to them when they go. The other part of it too is, again, these are like $14,000 towers originally. I paid a good bit less than half of that. And so if I sell these things and I want another pair of Focal towers in here, right, we're probably talking a pair of Canta 3s, maybe even a pair of Sopra 3s. But man, a pair of Canta 3s is like 15 grand now. A pair of Sopra 3s is a crazy $26,000. For what I outlaid for these, you know, on par with those other speakers that I just named in terms of quality and sonic performance and all of that. If I let these things go, it's going to be a long time before another pair of Focal towers potentially finds their way into this room. So I need to be darn sure to let them go. I'm okay letting them go, and I'm real committed to another handful of years or several years or whatever it might be of future in-walls in here. The one thing that I really want though out of the speakers in here is I would like to be able to just have two speakers. I'd like to decomplicate the setup without the subwoofers. Granted, from the in-wall perspective, I have them, they're in. I bought the amps, it all works, so be it. Maybe that's fine, but like these towers measured off of my Anthem in the theater were going down to 20 hertz acceptably. That's plenty of bass for the living room. So 2 towers would be great. I don't know that 2 in-walls without maintaining the in-wall subs would do the job the same way. I think even if I did go for the Utopia 1000 in-walls or whatnot, they have -3, -6 dB points only in the 40 hertz range, whereas again these towers are hitting down into 20. Maybe you get a little better than that with room modes and in actual measurements. If they could get down into the low 30s, then maybe. But I'm also a little constrained here by space. If you measure, you can kind of see where the wall takes its angle. So an in-wall needs to be below that point, and then of course above the trim. I don't have enough height here relative to where the subwoofer is in the wall right now to put a Utopia. If I were to do a Utopia, that thing's, gosh, on the order of 30 some inches, 40 some inches tall, and I have less than like 6 feet of space from that angle to the trim, and of course you'd want to leave a few inches above and below so you're not risking cutting into wood or weakening any of the points where everything comes together. So there's no way I can fit a Utopia and a sub. I could fit an IW-LCR6 in here and leave the sub. Maybe that's the ticket. The IW-LCR6 is really just an in-wall Sopra. It's probably an upgrade in parts to these Electra towers. It gives me that type of performance and performance profile and characteristic. The subs fill in that lower range a good bit, still turn down a little bit so I don't have the rumbling gutters and some of the other subwoofer integration issues that I have here in the living room. And I'm not spending the Utopia money anyway. I'm having some great speakers. It's going to be awesome. It stays clean. And if I really want to, down the road, I can add a discrete Anthem STR preamp, or I can add a JC5 or something to really open those speakers up. But there'd be no pressing need to do any of that. So I don't know. Maybe it's time to let the Electras go and just go ahead and expand from these triads to a pair of the IW-LCR6s. And I really like the idea of parity and some consistency too between the living room and the theater, like similar sound, similar electronics, similar products and performance characteristics. That way I'm not finding myself drawn to always go to one place or the other by keeping the 2 zones on par. Maybe that's a good lesson actually to take away, something for another video to talk about and maybe even to write about, is keeping your zones in some relative level of par that makes sense for you, so that you never find yourself having spent money to outfit a zone and then not wanting to use it because it's always substandard to another area of your house or whatever. Post in the comments, what do you think? Keep them, sell them, upgrade the end walls, buffer all the other changes that I'm making? What do you think? I also did make a couple other decisions. I did send the GIK grid fusers back this past Saturday. Again, looking at them, thinking about how they would look on the ceiling, the painting and all that stuff, I decided to go ahead and send them back. I will probably place my order for a bunch, or a set of 8 anyway, of the 2A absorption diffusion panels, the 2-inch thick ones, probably with the 2D pattern. Those will be so much easier. They'll come black, they can stick right on the ceiling, no special hanging arrangements and whatnot required. So that will be the next part of the project. I'll just cross my fingers for the next part of the project for the theater, and just cross my fingers and hope it's not April maybe before those things would arrive. So I have my clarity there. I made the call. I'm going to give up a little bit of performance, certainly, for a trade-off in what I think will be aesthetics, aesthetic performance, acoustic performance for aesthetic performance. I think they'll still add some value to the ceiling and to the space and the performance of the space overall. Compromises and trade-offs, it comes with every project.